lovely people. I'm Tempest, and this is Times with Tempest. Welcome back. In today's episode, I want to chat with you a little bit, particularly around the kind of background story and details of my diabetes diagnosis. Being diagnosed with type 1, technically, as an adult is always a little jarring. And so I want to give a little backstory, talk about my experience with being misdiagnosed, and just give you some suggestions along the way. So essentially, kind of part one, if you want to flip through or kind of fast forward through the episode, I'll talk as quickly and try to be as brief and concise as possible. But I was a pre-diabetic for a while in 2022. I lost about 30 pounds the first part of that year, and I would have my labs done and I was no longer pre-diabetic. We know that particularly with pre-diabetes and type 2 diabetes, that diet and exercise can really help you control that. And so I was really excited about that. Got through the end of 22, the beginning of 2023, just before the MLK holiday.
Yo, don't let me die.
I was pregnant. That was interesting to say the least, because I had done all that work to lose weight and then ultimately gained it back. So throughout pregnancy, if you're familiar with that process, there is a glucose test that you have to do to see and test for gestational diabetes. I failed that test. So I did struggle with gestational diabetes. I did have to take insulin during the latter part of my pregnancy, and I was diet controlled. I had to have these weekly appointments and phone calls and, control or take note of like my blood sugars, right? And there were times where my insulin was, the number of units I was taking was changing. As a result of having gestational diabetes, you are required to do that glucose test again after pregnancy to see. My dog just busted in the room. Hey, Zoe. To see if you have actual diabetes, because that is a risk. I failed the glucose test again, and I say fail and put that in quotation marks, which meant that I was diagnosed with type 2 diabetes. I had to, obviously that was all done at the OB's office. I had to follow up with my primary care physician. They reviewed the labs and they were like, yep, you have type 2 diabetes. I don't think you need insulin. We can't give you any of the newer meds like Ozempic or anything like that because you're breastfeeding. There's not enough research out around how that could impact your little one. And so I think the best course is to put you on metformin. I take the doctor's advice. I'm bummed about it because I didn't want to have diabetes, gestational or type 2, right? And so a little while after that diagnosis, things were not okay. I started having issues with my vision to the point where I could actually see better with my glasses off. I stopped driving. I had to have some appointments done for that. I started feeling really bad, and because I still had glucose monitoring supplies, I was checking my blood sugar and I was in the 300s. And my sister was like, girl, you got to go to the emergency room. But I was in those high ranges on a daily basis. And so I followed back up with my primary care physician, and I was just like, I think I need to see a specialist. Please give me a referral to see an endocrinologist. And their response was, I'm going to put it in, but I don't really think that's necessary. Not the best response. But I got the referral. I saw the endocrinologist, and the endocrinologist kind of had me go through my history and was just like, yeah, something's awry. Let's do some extra tests. So she did some antibody testing, only to find out that I actually have LADA, which is latent autoimmune diabetes. It's basically being diagnosed with type 1 diabetes as an adult. We are so used to type 1 diagnosis happening with children, and for a long time we would call it juvenile diabetes. We know that's not the case anymore. You can have type 1 as an adult, and LADA just means it was onset later in life. So 38 years old. Come to find out, I actually have type 1 diabetes. You may hear something if you research it. Sometimes it's a little nickname. It's given type 1.5 just to denote that you were diagnosed as an adult versus as a child, but that can get really confusing. And so ultimately, I was misdiagnosed. It's hard to say whether or not gestational diabetes caused this or it would have happened regardless. But essentially, it could have just been the type 1 diabetes, but because I was pregnant, it naturally fell under the gestational diabetes diagnosis. We know that sometimes medicine is just guessing and trying to figure things out. So that's kind of the backstory of the diagnosis, a little bit about being misdiagnosed, which sucked. I don't see that primary care physician anymore, and the real diagnosis. And so now what's happening with my current diagnosis, I am insulin dependent technically because I don't always take my insulin like I'm supposed to. I have to wear a continuous glucose monitor and I get alerts because I run the risk of trending low blood sugars. And I think I shared this story it's been a year and I'm still adjusting to what this means for my life moving forward. Potential risk factors for other family members. I just want to bring awareness that there are screenings out there for type 1 that you can get, but also healthcare is a challenge. And when you think about being a Black woman in healthcare, right, that comes with a whole nother set of challenges. And so I think at the root of this entire story is when you feel like something isn't right, ask for a second opinion, ask for the referrals to see the specialist, figure out a way, because you have to own your health. You have to stand your ground. You have to advocate for yourself. And I'm not sure I would have gotten here if I didn't do my own research to know what an endocrinologist was and that was the person that I needed to see, and to really say, I don't care if you don't think that it's a good idea. I think it's a good idea, so I'm going to do it regardless. So just stand up for yourself. Talk to your loved ones, learn more. You can do some research around the screening for type 1. I'll share a URL that's just kind of as a starting point in the description box down here. I am not a medical doctor. I am still trying to learn more about LADA and type 1 in general, and it's a lot of trial and error on my end. Again, figuring out my diet and my exercise and how all those things kind of impact my blood sugar. So if you want to know more about that story or my diagnosis, or if you have questions, I'll try my best to answer them. But I think that's all for now. Advocate for yourself, get multiple opinions. You know what's best for you. We'll see you next time.